Have you ever found yourself utterly alone in the dead of night, surrounded by countless secrets, bound volumes whispering tales older than time? What if something else was listening? Something that thrives on forgotten knowledge and silence, waiting in the shadows of dusty archives to correct every perceived error, including your very existence? This isn't just a story about a lonely night shift. It's a descent into an obsession with perfect order, where the slightest misplacement can cost you more than just your job. It can cost you your mind, or even your soul. The university library, a monolithic edifice of stone and glass stretched into the cold winter sky. Its vast interior, a labyrinth of hushed aisles and towering bookshelves. For Ethan, a young, earnest security guard fresh out of college, the night shift here was a godsend. The meager pay was secondary to the promise of steady hours, money he desperately needed for his younger sister's ongoing medical treatment. He'd never been one for ghost stories, preferring the logic of a well-organized database to the chaos of the unknown. But the sheer, oppressive quiet of the library after closing hours began to fray at his nerves. His routine was rigid. Clock in at 11 p.m., check the main floors, ensure all windows were locked, then descend into the subterranean depths of the restricted archives, a vast, rarely accessed vault of ancient, uncategorized volumes. The archives were perpetually cold, a damp, earthy chill that no amount of heating seemed to dispel. And the air hung heavy with the scent of aged paper and dust, a smell both comforting and unsettling. He'd flash his torch down endless corridors of towering shelves, the being swallowed by the oppressive darkness, each row a silent testament to forgotten knowledge that it began subtly the first few nights. A book, perfectly aligned minutes before, found jutting out from its shelf, or lying open on a reading table, its pages rustling as if turned by an unseen hand. Ethan would reshelve it, muttering about drafts or residual air currents, but a prickle of unease would trace its way up his spine. The library's silence, once a welcome companion, started to feel like a held breath, as if the very building was listening, waiting. He found himself pausing, listening intently in the profound quiet. Sometimes he swore he could hear it. The faint, almost imperceptible whisper of pages turning, a soft rustle like dry leaves skittering across the floor, even though the air was still. He'd flick on his flashlight, sweeping the beam across the rows of silent books, convinced he'd catch a glimpse of something, anything. But there was never anything there, just the endless spines and the oppressive shadow of the stacks. His sleep patterns began to suffer. The isolation of the night shift, coupled with the strange occurrences, left him wired, his mind replaying every creak and whisper. He'd drift off only to be jolted awake by the sensation of someone standing over him, or the distinct sound of a book thudding to the floor. The line between dream and reality began to blur, and the exhaustion of consecutive night shifts made him question his own perceptions. He tried to confide in Mrs. Albright, the eccentric, long-serving head librarian whose office was a cluttered sanctuary nestled deep within the archives. She was a woman steeped in the library's history, her knowledge as vast and dusty as the volumes she guarded. "Oh, Ethan, you'll get used to it," she'd chuckled, her eyes twinkling behind thick spectacles. The library has its own rules, you see. Its own quiet ways. Just make sure everything stays in its proper place. Her words, meant to be comforting, only deepened his unease, hinting at a sentience in the very building he guarded. A more direct, psychological assault began with the cold. Not just the ambient chill of the archives, but sudden localized drops in temperature, pockets of icy dread that would follow him as he moved through the stacks. He'd feel a cold breath on his neck. Even in the still air, a distinct sensation of an unseen presence standing directly behind him. He started wearing layers, piling on sweaters, but no amount of clothing could ward off the profound, spiritual cold that seeped into his bones. He started developing an unsettling habit. He would find himself muttering facts, dates, and historical figures under his breath as he walked, as if trying to prove his own knowledge, or perhaps to fill the overwhelming silence with something concrete. But then, a chilling new phenomenon began. The whispers would answer, correcting him, always, with a subtle, almost imperceptible inaccuracy, just enough to sow doubt. "No, Ethan." A faint, dry voice would seem to emanate from the shelves. It was 1864, not 1865. The Battle of Antietam was in September, not August. It was maddening, as he knew his facts, yet the whisper held an uncanny conviction. One night, while doing his rounds in the restricted archives, Ethan paused before a shelf of rare, leather-bound atlases. He glanced at his reflection in the polished wood of a nearby desk. His image was there, but for a fleeting moment, his eyes seemed to be empty, hollow, a deep, unsettling blankness where his own earnest gaze should have been. Then it snapped. Back to normal. He blinked, shaking his head, convinced it was just exhaustion, a trick of the flickering fluorescent lights above. But as he continued his patrol, a low hum filled the archives, a sound that seemed to emanate from the very walls, growing slowly in intensity. It was the sound of countless pages rustling, like a silent windstorm tearing through the library. Books, one by one, began to slide from their shelves, not crashing to the ground, but gently, almost deliberately, falling open to specific pages, displaying complex diagrams and arcane symbols. Ethan stood frozen, surrounded by a silent blizzard of falling books, a horrifying testament to the library's awakening and the presence of the silent cataloger. The cascade of falling books, silent save for the soft thud of leather on worn carpet, was Ethan's undeniable confirmation. This was no draft, no trick of the light, no product of an exhausted mind. Something malevolent, something tied to the vast, silent knowledge of the library, was awakening. He stumbled backward, his heart hammering against his ribs, his eyes darting frantically across the shelves where books continued to spill, their open pages a silent, accusing chorus. The hum intensified, a low, resonant thrum that vibrated through the floorboards, a sound both ancient and deeply unsettling, as if the very archives were breathing. The whispers, once subtle corrections, now became insistent commands. As Ethan moved through the chaotic rows of fallen volumes, he heard distinct, dry voices speaking directly into his mind, seemingly emanating from the open pages themselves. Error, disorder, restore the balance. His gaze fell upon a rare first edition of a philosophical treatise. Its spine snapped, its pages splayed. An overwhelming, inexplicable compulsion seized him. He had to fix it, to return it to its rightful place, to mend the disruption. It was an urge far stronger than any sense of duty, a command that bypassed his conscious thought. His nights became a blur of frantic, obsessive activity, guided by an unseen force, driven by the ceaseless whispers and the chilling cold that clung to him. Ethan found himself meticulously reshelving thousands of books, correcting misaligned spines, even re-alphabetizing entire sections of the archives, based on a system he didn't recognize, but which felt profoundly right. He'd discover sections of the archives that seemed impossibly vast, shelves extending into infinity, leading him into a labyrinth where the pathways shifted behind him, trapping him in an endless loop of uncorrectable disorder. The exhaustion was absolute, a bone-deep weariness that blurred the lines of reality. Sleep, when it came, was riddled with nightmares of being trapped in infinite aisles, surrounded by blank pages, or of being crushed beneath avalanches of falling books. He started finding old, leather-bound books that inexplicably contained fresh, handwritten annotations not in his own hand, but eerily familiar, a precise, elegant script that underlined factual errors and crossed out passages with meticulous, furious strokes. They were corrections, always corrections, in a hand that felt like a phantom limb of his own. The entity, the silent cataloger, wasn't just influencing him. It was infecting him with its own obsessive need for order. Ethan began to see errors everywhere. A crooked painting on the wall, a slight smudge on a window pane, a misplaced pen on his desk. He would spend hours correcting these perceived imperfections. His life outside the library shrink into a mere sliver of existence, his entire being consumed by the entity's maddening pursuit of absolute precision. His own secret, the occasional borrowing of rare books from the library for his personal studies, a minor act of intellectual rebellion, now felt like an unforgivable sin against the sacred order of the archives. He tried to explain his escalating torment to Mrs. Albright, showing her the impossibly shifted shelf, the precisely corrected annotations in ancient texts. She listened, her usual twinkle replaced by a deep, unsettling sadness in her eyes. "Ethan," she said, her voice softer, more somber than he'd ever heard it. "The archives, they don't like disorder. Not just in the books, but in the people who work here. Be careful what you let stay uncatalogued in your own mind." Her words, cryptic and unsettling, suggested a knowledge far deeper than he had imagined. The feeling of being watched became so intense, so pervasive, that Ethan felt the air itself pressing down on him, thick with unseen eyes. He started seeing fleeting, indistinct apparitions in the reflective surfaces of polished bookshelves, vague figures made of shadow and dust that moved just beyond the edge of coherent sight. He'd spin around, his heart pounding, but they would always dissipate, leaving him alone with his growing paranoia and the oppressive hum. One night, while frantically reshelving books in a section he was sure he'd organized just hours before, Ethan stumbled upon a security logbook, one of the physical ones kept for decades. He flipped it open, his eyes widening in horror. His own name was scrawled on the entry for the current night shift, but the timestamps were impossibly far apart, hours missing, and cryptic notes scrawled in the margins that he didn't remember writing. Disorder grows. He resists correction. It was as if he was losing time, or as if something was logging his shift, controlling his movements. The humming in the archives escalated, morphing into a low, guttural chanting, not in words he understood, but a sound that resonated. With primal dread, a chorus of unseen voices speaking in a dead language of facts and figures. The entire library seemed to vibrate around him, the shelves swaying slightly, the very air thick with the dust of forgotten knowledge. He felt the silent cataloger's presence all around him, a vast, hungry intelligence that sought to impose its terrifying, perfect order upon everything, including him. As the chanting reached a fever pitch, Ethan felt an overwhelming force compel him towards the main entrance of the restricted archives. He fought it, trying to resist, but his legs moved of their own accord. He was being drawn, inexorably, towards a colossal, ornate wooden door that stood at the far end of the archive's central hall. A door he'd never seen unlocked, never thought was anything but decorative. It was slowly, silently swinging open, revealing only impenetrable darkness beyond, a void waiting to swallow him whole. The colossal wooden door, ancient and seemingly fixed, swung open with an agonizingly slow creak, revealing not another section of the archives, but an abyss of swirling, inky blackness. The air that poured from it was impossibly cold, carrying the sharp scent of ozone and the damp metallic tang of forgotten things. The chanting intensified, now a multi-voiced chorus of dry, whispering voices that seemed to emanate from the very air, rattling his teeth and vibrating through his skull. Ethan, paralyzed by a combination of fear and the irresistible compulsion that had driven him, stood transfixed at the threshold, staring into the infinite void that pulsed with a malevolent, silent hum. His mind was a battleground. The silent cataloger was tearing through his memories, ripping away details, replacing them with its own obsessive pursuit of order. He saw fragmented images of his sister's face, her smile, her laughter. Then they would blur, replaced by perfectly ordered rows of numbers, meaningless data. He felt the entity trying to erase his personal history, to strip him down to a blank slate, leaving only the perfect vessel for its endless cataloging. The fear of losing himself, of becoming nothing but an extension of the library's cold, meticulous order was a terror beyond words. Dr. Thorne, guided by an unnerving intuition, arrived back at the library just as the strange atmospheric disturbances began. He found the main doors inexplicably unlocked and the lights flickering wildly within. He called out for Ethan, his voice swallowed by the oppressive silence. Following the increasingly strong hum and the chilling cold, he descended into the restricted archives, his heart pounding with a mixture of scientific curiosity and profound dread. The scene before him was straight out of a nightmare. Books scattered, shelves askew, and Ethan, standing rigid, facing the gaping, impossible darkness. As Dr. Thorne approached, he saw the faint, shimmering outline of a figure coalescing behind. Ethan, a tall, gaunt shape composed of shifting dust and shadow, its presence radiating an icy malevolence. The observer. Its eyes, deep pools of fragmented light, seemed to absorb all sound, all warmth, all life. It was like looking at a negative image of a human form, a void where presence should be. Dr. Thorne felt a terrifying understanding bloom in his mind. This wasn't a ghost. It was a conceptual entity, a physical manifestation of order, hungry for the chaos of human memory. The silent cataloger spoke directly into Dr. Thorne's mind, its voice a dry, rasping whisper that echoed the rustling of countless pages. Disorder, correction. He introduced an anomaly, an uncatalogued item. It must be processed. Dr. Thorne looked at Ethan, then at the open door, a chilling realization dawning on him. The uncatalogued item was Ethan's secret, the rare books he had borrowed. That small act of disorder, that personal secret, was what the entity was fixating on, drawing it closer, trying to force a confession, or absorb the error itself. Liam, sensing Dr. Thorne's presence, felt a flicker of hope, a desperate urge to resist the pull. He heard the cataloger's whispers in his mind. Enter, become part of the perfect collection. No more error, no more pain. He saw visions of serene, perfectly ordered shelves, volumes without dust, knowledge without corruption, a false paradise of ultimate control. But beneath it, a chilling emptiness, a complete loss of self. He knew what he had to do. The cataloger fed on hidden disorder, on secrets unacknowledged. To defeat it, he had to introduce an open, undeniable act of disorder, or confess the one he was hiding. He had to disrupt its perfect system, or admit his defiance. He looked at the vast, terrifying abyss of the open door, then at Dr. Thorne, his eyes wide with a desperate resolve. "The books," Liam choked out, his voice raw, fighting against the overwhelming compulsion. I have some of them at my apartment. The first editions, the ones I borrowed, I never returned them." The words were a defiant crack in the entity's perfect order, a conscious act of acknowledged chaos. As he confessed, the shadowy form of the silent cataloger recoiled, a shriek of pure, soundless fury emanating from it. The cold intensified, and the air crackled with raw, malevolent energy. The observer, its shimmering form convulsing violently, lunged forward, not at Liam, but towards Dr. Thorne, as if to punish the witness, to silence the knowledge of the confession. But before it could reach him, Liam, with a surge of desperate energy, stumbled forward, grabbing a heavy, ancient tome from the nearby shelf. With a primal yell, he hurled it, not at the entity, but into the gaping, dark maw of the open door. Book vanished into the darkness with a sickening thud, followed by a blinding flash of light that erupted from within the void. The roar that followed was not of a human or an animal, but of tearing paper, shattering glass, and splintering wood. A chorus of destruction that seemed to rip at the very fabric of reality. The colossal door slammed shut with a deafening bang. That shook the entire library, sending tremors through the floorboards. The humming ceased abruptly, the cold dissipated, and the flickering lights stabilized. The shadowy form of the silent cataloger was gone, vanished as if it had never existed, leaving only the oppressive silence in its wake.